Hello, Calaveras County, and welcome to another edition of Mondo Calaveras. I'm your host, Mike Taylor. Now, it's no secret that Calaveras County's been through a lot in the past couple of months, and we're going to talk about that today with Mike Blankenhein from CAL FIRE. Now, I know there's a much longer name for that organization, but I'm used to calling it CDF, so I'll stick with CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE
Mike,
works.
thanks for joining me
Absolutely.
today. Now, before we get to the Butte Fire and all of that, what got you into fighting forest fires?
Okay, I've been with CAL FIRE now, CDF when I started as well, since '94. And like almost everybody's working in the department today, I started as a seasonal firefighter working the summer months, and at the time I was doing it to pay for college. So
Great.
Fighting fire in the summertime, going to school in the wintertime.
A lot of guys and gals now do that.
Absolutely.
That's
There's
right.
several guys that work for us up in the West Point area. They're doing that same kind of track right now. So did that for several years, and by the time college was wrapping up, I kind of realized that the firefighting thing is kind of where I wanted to go with my career, and worked that direction, and been permanent with the department since 1999.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so now, what is your title? What do you do?
I'm currently the battalion chief and the West Point Battalion in Calaveras County, obviously.
Okay.
And that encompasses the northeastern part of Calaveras County.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Calaveras County, we've got divided into 4 battalions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, if that makes sense. So Battalion 1 is like Valley Springs area, and San Andreas. Battalion 3 is the West Point area, where I'm at, and it includes West Point, Glencoe, Wilseyville, Railroad Flat, and then all those areas in the forest and the SPI land east of east of West Point there, and it goes up to the snow line there. And then Battalions 2 and 4 are like the Highway 4 corridor, which runs from the county line to the county line from Stanislaus to Alpine County.
So being in West Point, and I'm going to forget the date, was it September 19th? No.
September 9th was the...
9th, that's right.
I guess we're talking about the Butte Fire. That was
Yes, we are, sorry. So I imagine you knew about it as soon as the call went out. You guys weren't when it was initially dispatched in Amador County, were you guys dispatched at all?
Not right out of the gate, but very soon thereafter. It was, I don't know the exact time, but it was about probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right in that neighborhood. And it was started in Amador County, obviously, so Amador El Dorado was running the fire. I was on duty that day in San Andreas, and I heard them dispatch it, and I came to McCullum Hill, so you can look right across and you can watch it, and watched what it was doing, realized they were probably going to ask for more resources, and so I got ready to go, and sure enough, within a few minutes, we sent a strike team of engines over, and I was a strike team leader there, so we went over. And
you crossed the river and
went up Butte Mountain Road.
From
up
fire West Point way or down below on Highway 49?
Yeah, came through Highway 49, through Jackson, up Clinton Road, and up to Butte Mountain Road that way. And, so we were there within probably an hour of the fire starting somewhere there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it doing at that point? Because I get the impression that it hadn't really gotten to that super boiling point.
It started sort of near the ridgetop on Butte Mountain Road, but down the slope a little bit. So what it was doing was it was making upslope runs at the houses that were on that Chiramonga Ranch Road, which is a little offshoot of Butte Mountain Road, and then upslope runs toward there, and then progressing up the drainage, if that makes sense. Kind of move it east up the McCullum River drainage. So for the first hour or so, it was really steering it around those houses up on top on Chiramonga Ranch. They're trying to get it out away from the houses to a place where we could work with it up there. In the meantime, it was still kind of slowly backing down the hill back towards Electra Road on the Amador County side, which runs right along the McCullum River there.
And so as you got there, I don't even remember noticing the smoke early that day, as it happened that day. And it didn't sound that serious initially. And then, what was it, about maybe 3 hours in that it...
Again, I don't have the specific time.
I'll use the word exploded. You can give us a better...
That's fairly accurate. So it, over the course of a couple of hours, it had backed down the drainage fairly far. And so I don't know if you remember the few days leading up to it. Like the 4 or 5 days before, we had 100-degree temperatures every day. We were in the middle of that hot spell. The humidities every day were in the teens, low 20s, that kind of thing. So very hot, very dry.
So
at the very end of a long summer, at the end of 4 years of drought.
yeah, sadly, the perfect conditions.
It really
for a
was. The
fire.
perfect conditions were there for it. And the thing we had that day that we don't normally have more than a couple of times a year is there was a north breeze blowing that day, which means the wind's coming from the north towards the south.
Kind of a
the
hot,
normal wind in
dry
that
wind.
canyon goes from west to east, kind of up the canyon, which pushes it up the canyon.
Yeah.
So by, again, 5 or 6 o'clock that afternoon, 3 or 4 hours into it, that northerly breeze had pushed it into the bottom there along Electra Road. And then
Okay.
unfortunately at 5:30, 6 o'clock, it spotted across the McCullamy River. And that's when it made that hard upslope run on the south side of the river. And that's when people saw the column really
Really
explode, because it made
explode,
it
explode.
ran up there pretty fast.
Now, I've talked to quite a few guys who were fighting that fire, and they just kind of get that deer in the headlights look almost.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe the behavior of this fire. It moved so fast, and it just did not let up. What was the experience being right there on the fire lines? Was it, oh
Yeah.
crap, we're not going to get a hold of this, or?
Yeah, once it crossed the river and the run it made from the river bottom going to the south up to Highway 26, it was obvious as soon as it crossed, it was going to go all the way to the top and get to Highway 26. That was obvious. And the run it made up the hill was very impressive. A lot of people saw the column that developed like that probably when it ran up there. Unfortunately, that's when it ran through that Boston Yale area.
The subdivision there.
Yeah, exactly. And then it crossed Highway 26 that evening, and even at that point, I don't think many people thought it was going to go a whole lot past that. But the problem we had is the weather conditions never changed from daytime to nighttime.
It stayed fairly windy that night, didn't it?
It did. It stayed hot, it stayed dry, and that north wind was very persistent and kept moving it further south, and it got established finally sometime early the next morning in that Calaveras River drainage, which is by Jesus Maria Road down in that area there. And then once the sun came up the next day and it was in that river drainage and that same north wind on it, it ran like crazy out of there.
It kind of had a field day.
Yeah, it did. For 2 days in a row, it burned almost, it burned about 30,000 acres 2 days in a row, like over a 48-hour period, which is, those are huge numbers.
Just unheard of. And
The biggest fire we've had in Calaveras prior to this point was the Old Gulch Fire in like 91 or 92.
I think 92,
92
yeah.
maybe, okay, and it burned 17,000 acres.
Yeah, which we thought was hell on earth at that time.
Right, right. So the fire spread and the fire behavior for 2 days was something like we haven't seen. We haven't seen in a populated area anyway. The Rim Fire a couple of years ago had a couple of days where it burned like that, but it was off in the forest lands, the timberlands, that kind of thing, so it wasn't going through people's property and houses and that sort of thing.
Was there a point where your engine, because you were from Calaveras County, got brought back across the river, or?
Yeah, so on the initial attack, I had the strike team is 5 engines and then the strike team leader. So we were over in Amador County till about, I don't know, noon, maybe 2, I don't know, noon, 2 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. So almost 24 hours in Amador County.
Okay.
And then back across the river and
Yeah.
trying to get people back to where they're more familiar with the terrain.
Were you starting to worry about West Point by that time?
Not West Point.
Okay,
Not West
but-
Point. West Point was a long way from there. At that point, I wasn't
by
worried.
that point,
there was
yeah.
a point later on where I very much was. At that point, I wasn't
Yeah,
too concerned.
okay.
I said it had 7, 8, 9 miles to go up Highway 26 before it was going to get as far as West Point. But like I said, there was a point later on where I was very concerned about about the town of West Point.
Now, we've got some photos, and unfortunately, I don't remember what order they're in, but let's take a look at them. I took these from the air with our airport manager, Kathy Zancanella, and this one, well, in fact, that's the Electra, or excuse me, that's where it rushed out of the river canyon.
Okay.
That's Boston Yale, kind of those homes there.
Oh, you can see the power lines going. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
and
Yep.
From my inexperienced eye, flying over that, it looked like, and this is really kind of a bad analogy, but it makes sense in my head, and it was a friend of mine who I went to high school here with. He said that McCullamy drainage is like one of those chimneys you put a couple of newspapers in the bottom of, put your charcoal in and get the fire going.
Right.
It looked to me like that's what the fire did right there at Boston Yale. Is that about
That's pretty accurate. If you, up on top from that end of Boston Union looking down, it is. Some people call them chutes, some people call them chimneys, some people call them gullies, but what it is it's a depression in the land, and it does act just like that. The air flows right up it, so it channels heat and energy and all that stuff right up.
And once
uphill.
you've got a fire burning that hot, it almost creates all its own weather too, doesn't it?
And where it crossed in the bottom, it crossed right into that drainage below Boston Yale, so it made a perfect run.
And just had all the fuel it could chew on.
Had all
really.
the tinder dry fuel that it could.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the next one. The thing from the air, and this says it, is, holy cow, everything is black, and yet not everything is black. And this, I'm glad to have you here. With fire behavior, does it, because we see some green trees in there that are those trees probably on the way to dying now? I mean, did the fire come through so hot that it just didn't have time to burn those leaves? And
some of those will probably die without a doubt.
Okay.
And it kind of depends on the run the fire was making at the time and what's going to, as far as vegetation goes, what's going to live and what's going to die.
I see.
If you look at some places where you can tell the fire made a hard uphill run and it's devoid of anything left, but nothing but a big black spot, like you can see kind of in the middle of the screen there. And then on some of the downhill sides, if the fire gets to the top and maybe backs down through some stuff, through trees and that kind of thing, those trees may have a chance of surviving.
Does fire typically not burn as hot if it's burning downhill? Is that?
If there's no wind behind it, it usually generally backs down, and that's a very low intensity fire.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
because we know heat rises, so
exactly. So
sorry,
if that's
I slowly
the case,
did the math in my brain as we were talking there.
Right. So trees and those kind of things that burned under those conditions, under no wind and maybe backing fires here and there, those things very, very well may survive.
Okay, I see. And so it just burned so hot. Now that is the Esperanza station right at Swiss,
Sheep Ranch and Railroad Flat
Swiss Ranch Road.
Yep.
And again, the tree, did it burn right around the station? It did.
It did.
Okay.
It absolutely did. Yep.
And so it's not deceiving from the air, because what I was surprised to see, again, was all the trees look okay, but it's obvious that the grass got burnt out.
Yeah.
So does that usually indicate the fire was moving pretty darn quick and it just kind of, burned off that dry grass and then it was done?
I think what we're looking at here is, it's hard to tell in the picture, but where the trees are green there in that middle pocket, there's a house to the left, and then the station is the green roof on the right there. And then the houses that we can't see in the picture, all those places had real good clearance as far as the brush removed, the needles removed off the ground, and those kind of things.
Yeah, that little swale there is pretty cleared out.
Yeah, exactly. So the fire, it burned around.
Didn't get a chance to get as
established
hot.
in the trees there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's something, and what I also noticed from the air is that clearance played a pretty big role, and I know there are some homes that were lost that had great clearance and that kind of stuff. So maybe you can address kind of both sides of that coin, because it's already looking like we're going to have a pretty dry summer next year.
Very much so.
Even if we have a regular wet winter, which in my opinion we haven't seen in a decade, but anyway.
And only time will tell on that.
Yeah. But if we get to next year, that clearance, what does that do for you when you're fighting a monster like this?
So for structure defense is going to be one of our top priorities anytime we get a fire that's burning in amongst the houses. That's always the life safety and structure defense are the two priorities we work with, and then perimeter control and so on.
Okay.
So what the defensible space does for us is it gives us something to work with when we get there if there is a fire coming. And what it does is it takes a fast-moving fire that can be in the treetops or those kind of things, and hopefully it'll bring it back down to the ground. And once it's back on the ground, it's much easier for our fire engines, bulldozers, hand crews to deal with. A fire burning through the treetops and moving through the treetops is very difficult for...
Yeah. Is that what this one was doing?
Very much so.
Just got into the trees and went?
Very much so, yeah.
Okay.
Very much so. Yeah. So, and there were houses lost in this that had great clearance. And like we talked, the rates of spread on this thing were things like we don't see very often. So unfortunately, there were people that had great clearance and did a great job, and the fire was moving so fast and so hot, they lost their houses.
Yeah.
But on the same token, like those other areas we talked about where the fire maybe not burned so intense, it was backing around, those kind of things. There were plenty of houses there that had great clearance that the fire went around without any kind of fire department intervention. So clearance does work, and that we advocate clearance 100% of the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's something you kind of have to keep an eye on year-round, right?
Unfortunately, I heard one homeowner call it man versus vegetation. So yes, it's an ongoing.
Yeah.
It is an ongoing thing. The brunt of the work is done up front. If you remove the brush and that sort of thing around your house, that's usually the hard part.
Yeah.
And the maintenance you have to keep up on, but it's way more manageable once the bulk of it has been
Yeah, it's
removed.
easier to take care of some grass than it is
Absolutely.
the manzanita and chamise and that kind of stuff, which those two fuels, I remember the Leonard fire
Yeah.
here just out of San Andreas. You could tell that that's what the fire loved, because anywhere that stuff was, it was all gone, but the deck that the manzanita ran right underneath was gone, as was the house. So, and that was back many, many years ago too, before clearance was stressed as heavily as it is now, because now it's what, 100 feet?
It's 100 feet is the
100 feet.
Yeah,
okay.
100 feet.
And that's basically, you want the understory gone, right?
Right. Yeah, we're not looking for 100 feet to completely clear around the house.
You don't want a sterile rock garden.
So what you're looking for is exactly what you said. The understory gone, the brush gone for sure, and the trees spaced out evenly, but a decent spacing between them, so the fire will have a hard time carrying from tree to tree if it does get into the tree tops.
Yeah.
And probably most importantly is get rid of the ladder fuels, which are those shorter trees, the brush, the tall grass that can carry the fire from the ground and into the treetops.
Okay.
So that's why we have to keep the grass short, the brush gone. Like I said, ladder fuels removed, trees limbed up to 7 or 8 feet, so those branches don't hang down to the ground where they can. The ground fire can't carry into the treetops.
Can carry up there. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the most frightening moment for you fighting this?
That's a good question. I don't know about frightening, but maybe disheartening. Maybe would probably be. I think it was a Wednesday afternoon when it started, and then 30 hours into it, maybe not quite 30 hours into it, about 4 or 5 o'clock the next afternoon, Thursday afternoon. So I was still on the Highway 26 side, and talked to my partner who was on the south side of and he's telling me where he's at, that they're up at the Sierra Vista Lookout and around Doster Road, and it was. I just could not believe how far it had gone in a few
such
hours.
a short
in 6 or 8
period of time.
hours. Yeah, and it was just disheartening.
Well, I went up on that Friday night to the Calaveras County Airport, and there were several people up there, and it was just kind of a, I knew that was a place where I could see and get a feel for what, because I live in San Andreas, and that's where evacuation, not evacuation, there was kind of an up and down there, and I ended up staying with friends in Angels Camp that night, just because I didn't want to hang out at home myself. But at the airport, what I was blown away seeing was fire, 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 fire. I mean, and I knew that territory, some of it the old Gulch Fire territory, like we talked about, but it's oak foothills, that I knew were full of all kinds of stuff that fire likes to eat. And what I'm going to ask, and maybe you can't answer it, and I'm not trying to trap you into anything political, but I told you before we started filming, my father retired as the ranger in charge back in the day with when it was the California Division of Forestry. And in those days, and this is back in the mid-'70s, second half of the '70s, the ranchers would call Dad and say, "Hey Jim, I've got about 100 acres of manzanita and grease brush that the cattle can't get to. I want to touch it off." And Dad would say basically 3 things. 1, clear around it, cut a big line around it. 2, call me the morning you want to light it off, because I want to make sure it's a good day.
It's a good day to do
This
it.
was before all the air pollution control stuff and all that. And the 3rd thing was, if it gets away from you, you're on the hook. And now, granted, those were gentleman's handshake kind of things. Now, where I'm going with all of this is, control burns seem like something that we would be doing a lot more of. Is that something that, do you think, like a disaster like this is going to help that process kind of, because we know that there's patches here, there, and that can really spell disaster if they get going.
Right, no, for sure. Cal Fire does have a vegetation management program. We have foresters assigned that manage it and those kind of things. I'm not going to say our hands are tied, 'cause that's not exactly true, but the land that Cal Fire...
I'll say it, they kind of are.
The land that Cal Fire operates on isn't owned by CAL FIRE. The U.S. Forest Service, call it a luxury, if you will, I guess, has the luxury of owning the land they work on, so they're free and clear to do all of their vegetation management, prescribed burns, and all those kind of things. So for us to do that, there has to be a VMP agreement in place, and you can imagine the process to go through to that. But no, the program is there, and we just have to show that it's mutually beneficial to both the landowner and CAL FIRE as an agency, meaning that it helps you as the landowner, and that I can establish rangeland or those kind of things, and help us as the firefighting agency to make a fuel break or help us control fire further on down the road. So there are things out there.
And it helps you with some training, really.
They're great training burns, a great experience for the guys that we have on the engines. No, absolutely. And even for, we do allow burning. I mean, we do allow burning in the wintertime, so landowners can burn without us. Right now, we're still requiring permits if you're going to do it. But in Calaveras County, people are allowed to do broadcast burning. Amador County, not so much. Tuolumne County, I don't believe they are. I'm not 100% certain about that. But so Calaveras County, those landowners can still do those kind of things. They can still burn rangeland and that sort of thing. And you're right, we don't see it that often anymore.
Yeah, 'cause I want to say that the last one I saw that CAL FIRE was involved in was just here in San Andreas on some property just toward Valley Springs.
Right.
And even when that one was being done, a couple of the CAL FIRE guys said, boy, we won't see one of these in a while.
Probably.
Because it was one of those where so many boxes had to be ticked that it's almost easier to go out there with a weed eater than it is to try and burn it, isn't it?
We do a lot of our fuel breaks these days with chipping, mastication, the hand crew work, the pile burning, those sort of things, for sure.
Now, do you end up actually physically going out, and I know there are people who do it, it's probably not you personally, and do those kinds of inspections? Because what I'm thinking is you're in the West Point area, which is a pretty wooded, part of this county. It's not sort of the rolling, mellow grassland. You've got lots of those ladder fuels. What do you do to kind of keep an eye on a community like that?
So CAL FIRE has the PRC 4291 program, which is the defensible space program. That's the 100-foot clearance that we talked about a little bit ago. The engine companies, which we have 2 in West Point, 1 in Esperanza, and 1 a little further up the hill in Hermit Springs, which is just up Winton Road.
Oh, that's right.
So, so they do. They'll go out and they do actual home inspections and educate homeowners, and there is some teeth in the program for people that are really grossly non-compliant. And we don't go that route very often, but we do have a little bit of teeth into it if we need to. And for the last couple of years, CAL FIRE as a whole has hired defensible space inspectors for every unit. So we've had 4 people working since about last April, and they work a 5-day work week, and that's their job, is they do defensible space inspections. Yeah, they do. I can't speak to the exact number they've done in the unit in the last 6 or 8 months, but it's several thousand between Calaveras and Tuolumne County. So the inspections are ongoing. We do quite a few of them.
When that happens, does the homeowner, regardless of what the inspector finds, does the homeowner know he or she has been there? Do they leave a card, or do they leave a form that says, "Hey, great job"?
Yes, they do. Yes, we try not to be stealthy in that kind of thing.
I kind of figured that too.
Yeah, and especially the people that had to do a great job, a great clearance, we like to let them know, "Hey, we've been here. We like what you've done. Thanks." That sort of thing. Sure.
What with something like the Butte fire, as a firefighter, does it get disheartening when you're on the 3rd day and you just feel like you're not making any headway? And I know you guys aren't seeing all the news reports and all that stuff, but we were saturated with doom and gloom, and the fire's going to get all the way to Yosemite, and that kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, Mountain Ranch burned down, and the rumor mill. I'm sorry, I'm against social media in that regard, because people will take.
We did. We struggled a lot with that, with the rumor control on that.
Yeah.
Yes, there was some frustration, obviously. When you're going 24, 48, 72 hours and there's no let up, and usually the fire doesn't do that. It burns for 10 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, and you get an upper hand on it, and things start kind of mellowing out a little bit. And this just kept getting worse than worse than worse than worse until it finally didn't anymore. And that was it was probably 5 full days of that, where just struggling to try to get around this thing. And then finally, I think it was Saturday the 12th or maybe Sunday the 13th, the wind changed from that northerly breeze and started blowing back from the west to the east. And then that
really gave you a break.
Yes, and then took real advantage of that and were able to fire off Frico City Road, which controlled that whole north-south line on the south end of the fire there. And
that's an amazing shot I've got from the air.
That was a big turning point.
I could tell you
yes,
used that as a break
line.
because
Yes,
look, fire here, no fire there.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That was something. So
yeah, and then once we were done with that, like I think it was Saturday or Sunday of that first week, people, I don't like to say relaxed, but a little bit of the pressure was off, and then we were down to taking care of the flanks around West Point, San Andreas, and then if you look at the map, there's that big unburned pocket in Mountain Ranch that the actual town itself was. So several days of finishing those kind of things. But for several days on this, there was some frustration there. It just kept getting bigger and bigger.
I don't even know if you'll know, but numerous agencies. I mean, I remember watching fire trucks go by from darn near every city and county in California, if not, across the western states. Is there a real shared, we're going to kick this thing, that you see those signs now, go kick Butte. But, is there a real sense in the fire camp, when you've got a couple hours to crash, how are we going to get a hold of this thing, and...
Yeah, you definitely got to take your rest when you can. There are opportunities where you can get a little bit of shut-eye here and there, and we build our shifts for the firefighting for that. We definitely build in a work rest cycle. We're very aware that people cannot work 72 hours without rest. And that doesn't happen. So no, for sure you take your rest when you can. And and the camaraderie there, and then the can-do attitude is prevalent amongst everybody. And you're right about the engines everywhere. One of the surreal moments was driving into West Point morning 2 or 3 and seeing Los Angeles City Fire Department engines lined up on Main Street. That was kind of a
and I don't mean to disparage them, but I can just kind of see them looking around going, where are we?
What happened? Yeah, right.
Well, and I know that people who do this work don't do it for the thank yous, but I'm sure that the community's respect and response to this has been pretty heartening.
Unbelievably so, actually. Even the people who were horribly affected by it, namely Mountain Ranch, was probably the hardest hit, and the community surrounding that. The devastation through some of those areas was terrible. Yeah. And even going to community meetings shortly after it had gone through there, maybe within a week or something like that. So very fresh wounds and that kind of thing. And how positive the people were there was mind-boggling to me. I couldn't believe it, how upbeat they still were and thankful for the efforts and these kind of things. That was unbelievable.
They are. That's something I appreciate about this area is we're people who help each other, and when we see a need, we jump in to help with it, and now we're in that recovery process thanks to the work of you and your fellow firefighters. So, Mike Blankenheim, it's been a pleasure having you here. I hope to never see you again to talk about a fire like this.
Hopefully so. Maybe we'll see you in the grocery store.
That's right, that's right. And when you see him in the grocery store, folks, say thank you. Thanks for joining me on Mondo Calaveras. I'm Mike Taylor. Enjoy.